All right, good afternoon and welcome everyone. Welcome to Front Row with the faculty at St. Joseph's College. My name is Joanne Bean. I'm the Vice President Chief Advancement Officer here at the college, and it's my pleasure to moderate and help introduce our speakers for this afternoon. Our topic, and why you're all here, and it's great to see some familiar faces. Hello to all of you. The title of the topic, the title of the talk is The Power of Awareness, A Path to Transformation. And you're here to listen to two wonderful speakers. I'm going to introduce both. And I want to tell you a little bit about the format and how this afternoon will run. It is a 1-hour program. We ask you to put your microphone on mute just because of background noise and such. And then throughout the presentation, certainly if you have questions, if you wouldn't mind putting them in the chat box, or you can wait to the end and sort of raise your hand and we'll call upon you. We will entertain questions at the end of the talk. It'll be about a 30-minute or more presentation and then an opportunity for 15-20 minutes of questions at the very end. I also ask you to consider relaxing and enjoying this afternoon. That's what the Front Row with the faculty is all about. And with our two speakers, I think you're really going to enjoy this afternoon's talk. So let me begin by first introducing Suellen Nadeau. Suellen is a faculty member at the college. I'll talk to you about that. But she began her career as a psychiatric mental health nurse practitioner. She's had over 30 years of opportunities to observe what has worked well for herself, her family, friends, and clients, and students to reach their highest level of wellness. She sees herself as a bridge between allopathic Western medicine and Eastern holistic medicine. And she utilizes the best of both paradigms to practice the art and science of integrative lifestyle medicine that heals bodies, minds, and spirits. She chairs the Integrative Health and Wellness Sciences at St. Joseph's College Institute for Integrative Aging. You're going to hear a little bit more about that at the end of our talk. She's the interdisciplinary assistant professor. She's developed and taught over 16 different integrative health lifestyle medicine courses at St. Joseph's College in the undergraduate and graduate level. And she's developed 2 minors in integrative health and wellness. She is an expressive arts mental health therapist and a certified wellness practitioner. And she's certified a mental health integrative medicine provider. So with all of those credentials behind her, she is perfectly suited, I think, to talk about this subject. And in doing so, she wanted to reach out to certainly one of the newest members formally of our community at St. Joseph's College, and that is Nadeau Tramuto, who is our honorary scholar in residence. He's the first person at the college to hold that title, and the title came about just about a year ago. But let me tell you a bit about his background and his relationship with the college. Some of you may know that Nadeau was named the 2019 commencement speaker, and he certainly received an honorary degree. He also is a globally known health activist. He was formerly the CEO of Tivity Health, and the New York Times deemed him a global health activist. He is an author. He's now involved in completing his second book, so you'll be hearing about that. But he's also the founder and chairman of Healthy Villages, the founder and chairman of the Tramuto Foundation, and he's well known to many people on campus. He has spoke several times to our student government group. He also has spoke at faculty classes at various events within the classroom on campus. And he has a lot to share about his really new focus and title of his book, which involves compassionate leadership. So Suellen thought that Nadeau would be the perfect partner to talk about this very important subject this afternoon. I could go on as I consider Nadeau's CV, which is pages long, to tell you more about all his awards and accolades. But to us at St. Joseph's College, he's a dear friend. He is a compassionate leader himself, and he is bringing all sorts of new resources and support for the college and our future direction. So thank you for joining us, Nadeau. Suellen, thank you for inviting Nadeau, and let's turn it over to Suellen.
Thank you. Welcome. I invite you to take 3 deep belly breaths, letting go of any things, any thoughts outside of class. This afternoon, we'll be exploring the power of awareness. Nadeau and I are delighted that you could join us. Thank you for your presence. Slide, please. We have all been traumatized by recent events in one form or another. Living in the midst of this global crisis with all the accompanying layers of unprocessed fears, isolation, alienation, and violence has changed each and every one of us. When our bodies and our minds and our spirits are overwhelmed, energy gets stuck and often manifests as physical, emotional, spiritual pain. Bessel van der Kolk, who is the leading world expert on traumatic stress, calls this phenomena the body keeps score. So we are reunited in our shared suffering. We are connected in our joint societal addiction to the repetitive use of screens, which involves a lot of rapid data surfing in the brain, and it causes our brains to be aroused and vigilant. Nicholas Carr, author of the book, The Shallows, What the Internet is Doing to Our Brains, said, information grazing is not the same thing as cultivating a synthesis of wisdom, yet it is the norm, resulting in a shallow understanding of complicated issues. We seem stuck in anger, blame, and defensiveness with diminished critical thinking skills. So we approve what we've been doing is not working well. So how do we move forward? Slide, please. We look to neuroscience to guide us in how to retrain our brains and soothe our nervous systems so that we can develop the skills of reflective inquiry, empathy, and compassion for self and others. We now have quantum physics that tells us where attention goes, energy flows. We are hardwired with a protective mechanism called the negativity bias that causes us to scan the world continually for danger. When potentially dangerous threats come, it immediately goes to the amygdala, which is the emotional center of our brain, and it puts our bodies into fight, flight, and freeze before the executive functioning part can even decide really whether it's a threat or not. So in the old days, our nervous systems gave us the ability to run or fight or play dead if we were threatened by, say, a saber-toothed tiger. When the danger passed, our nervous systems would rebalance back into rest and digest, and we would have the opportunity to rejuvenate. Well, times have changed. Our nervous systems have not adapted well to the constant on-the-go demands of our current lifestyle. The high stress levels caused by the accelerated pace of today's world throws us out of balance so that we are perpetually in low grade fight, flight, and freeze. And we are paying the price. 70% of Americans were dying from lifestyle diseases from chronic imbalances in body, mind, and spirit prior to the virus. And now we add the fear-based layers of mass losses, poverty, food insecurity, inequality, and loneliness. The science of psychoneuroimmunology treats the mind, treats the nervous system, and treats the immune system as one interrelated unit, which explains how chronic stress leads to chronic disease. Neuroscience shows us that the most sophisticated part of our brain, the neocortex, can override fight, flight, and freeze response in our body. And that's through the power of conscious thought. We are in need of evidence-based practices to harness the powers of the brain. Next slide, please. Now look at the bottom of this slide. I just want to point out on the right, there is a little picture, and you may not be able to read what it says, but it says that acting with intention is active mindfulness meditation. So the research shows that a regular practice of mindful meditation improves our brain's abilities to process emotions under stress, shifting away from that autopilot, that protective mode. So what it does for us is it widens our perspective, it increases our reasoning abilities, and it increases flexibility of choices. I would say that mindfulness is a lifestyle medicine tool because it reestablishes the natural balance of your body, mind, and spirit. It's a skill set that intentionally focuses one's awareness in the present moment, utilizing anchors such as your breath to bring you back again and again to an internal place of non judgment and being at ease with whatever situation arises. It's not so much about what happens to us as it is about our response to the challenge. Next slide, please. If we choose to predominantly view the world through the lens of optimism, we are more likely to experience life's blessings, which is healing to our nervous system. This also holds true in the inverse. If we view the word predominantly through the lens of pessimism, we're more likely to find it, and we're more likely to have distressful experiences. The lens one uses to view the world through and the choice of where one puts their awareness creates their perception of the world. So approaching life from a mindful perspective gives us the skills to shape our lives with reflective intention and make order out of chaos. When we use our skills to accept discomfort instead of fight it, we have all sorts of energy to go with the flow and navigate the storms of life more wisely. When we use all of our senses in the moment to visualize a comforting scenario, our bodies respond as if it's actually happening, and we are returned to homeostasis, which is the optimum state of highest level of wellness. An ancient Chinese proverb says, tension is who we think we should be. Relaxation is who we are. There's a parable of the two wolves that I'd like to share with you. One evening, an elderly Cherokee brave told his grandson about a battle that goes on inside of people. He said, "My son, the battle is between the two wolves that live inside of all of us. One is evil. It is anger, envy, jealousy, sorrow, regret, greed, arrogance, self-pity, guilt, resentment, inferiority, false pride, superiority, and ego. The other is good. It is joy, peace, love, hope, serenity, humility, kindness, empathy, generosity, truth, compassion, and faith." The grandson thought a minute and then asked his grandfather, "Which wolf wins?" The old Cherokee simply replied, "The one that you feed." Remember, where attention goes, energy flows. Our ability to extend self-compassion for our own emotional wounds connects us to the secret suffering of others and opens us to empathy. Neuroscience shows us that the same brain regions activated by being hurt personally are also activated when we observe other in pain. Next slide, please. Losing my voice. Compassion awakens as we allow ourselves to be touched by our shared vulnerabilities with others, and then tenderness can bloom. When we lean into the vulnerability, look it square in the face, acknowledge and accept its presence, it loses its emotional charge. When we are touched by another's suffering and make a conscious choice to respond with kindness and caring, we transform vulnerability into compassion. Researchers at the U of California found that mindful breathing can provide a calm, steady focus that reduces emotional reactivity. When the breath is synchronized with mindful movement, it allows the body to flow with a natural ease into a restful yet cognitively alert state, the present moment. Mindfulness gives us the tools to pause for our cause, creates a sense of stillness in which we can ground ourselves, and gives us the ability to respond with wisdom versus emotional reactivity. The ability to stay steady under duress in the present moment is the foundation for resilience. Mindfulness gives us the opportunity to transform negative emotional states and cultivate positive emotional states through the power of where we choose to put and shine our light of awareness. It is the intentional action of bringing one's focus to seeing, touching, and listening wholeheartedly, and being ever mindful of how one is touching and being touched by the world. Like shifting the lens on the camera to get a clearer picture, intentionally shifting one's awareness can offer freeing clarity. Our bodies, minds, and spirits need regular visits to our internal oasis to rest, to digest, to resource, and to replenish. We need to nourish ourselves to flourish through all informal practices, such as being in the moment with an attitude of gratitude as you're doing your daily task, to more formal meditative practices, such as loving kindness meditation, the moving meditations like Tai Chi, Yo Chi, Qigong, and forgiveness and gratitude practices. Tara Brach, a psychologist and master teacher, shares that being a mindful and compassionate witness, finding a balance present amidst the changing currents of life, will increase an inner sense of ease, strength, and freedom. Mindfulness gives us a window of tolerance, a spaciousness, so that we can observe the truth of the discomfort clearly and calmly move through it to release it. Mindfulness empowers us to make wise decisions by preventing us from being emotionally hijacked. 47% of our waking hours are mentally spent time traveling, the past, focusing on regrets, or to the future in the form of worrying. The research shows that the more people's minds wander, the less happy they are. Thoughts are a continual stream of nonstop judgments, comments, plans, and worries. We have about 60,000 thoughts a day, with 95% of them being the same as yesterday. Thoughts create our perception of life. Thoughts are a virtual reality. Mindfulness gives that safe space so that we can investigate them in the spirit of curiosity. It's not about stopping the thoughts, excuse me. It's about turning down the emotional volume of the thoughts and feelings so that we are in control of them, not controlled or defined by them. The National Center for Complementary and Integrative Health says, wellness is a journey, an evolving practice that requires conscious engagement to gain perspective. The regular practice of mindfulness involves cultivating a wise relationship with the thoughts and feelings that gives us the power to shift, to change that perspective. Mindfulness is exercise for the brain. Just as one needs to exercise their body regularly to gain strength, one needs to mindfully meditate regularly to gain strength to persevere. When insight provides understanding, understanding cultivates forgiveness. Pema Chodron, a renowned Buddhist nun, said, "You are the sky. Everything else, it's just the weather. Feelings and thoughts are just weather reports on what you are perceiving in the moment." Tara Brach elaborates, imagine that you're flying in an airplane. You're passing through a cloud, and every window that you look out of, all you can see is the cloud. When you emerge from the cloud, you can see the sky all around you, and you realize that the cloud is just a small piece of the whole picture. Neuroscientist Jill Bolt Taylor states, it takes 1.5 minutes to access the emotional center of the brain and go through all the neural circuitry if we do not fuel it with further thoughts. However, if we play and replay triggering stories that can lock us into difficult emotions for days, sometimes even decades. Mindfulness shows us that thoughts are present, but not always true. It gives us the centered presence to examine our thoughts, to choose whether we want to believe them or not. And it gives them the freedom to know that we are not our thoughts. Poet Mark Nepo shares to listen mindfully is to lean into softly with the willingness to be changed by what we hear. Next slide, please. Pema Chodron shared, compassion is not a relationship between the healer and the wounded. It is a relationship between equals. Only when we know our own darkness well can we be present with the darkness of others. Compassion becomes real when we recognize shared humanity. She goes on to say that if we learn to open our hearts, anyone, including the people who drive us crazy, can be our best teachers. We look to the wisdom of visionaries who have successfully navigated the art of compassionate leadership. Jesuit priest and psychotherapist Anthony DeMello said, when you serve people, you help, you support, you comfort, you alleviate pain. When you see people in their inner brevity and goodness, you transform and create. Nelson Mandela, former South African president and Nobel Peace Prize winner, adds, it never hurts to see the good in anyone. They often act better because of it. Reflecting on the 27 years he was incarcerated, he stated, as I walked out of the door towards the gate that would lead to my freedom, I knew if I did not leave my bitterness behind, I would still be in present. The transformation starts at the individual level and ripples outward. Viktor Frankl, an Austrian neurologist and concentration camp survivor, states, everything can be taken from man, but the human freedom to choose one's attitude in any given set of circumstances, to choose one's own way. The skills of recognizing and being in peace with our uncomfortable thoughts so we can reflect upon them and learn from them gives us the power to release misperceptions and flow fluidly through the uncertainties of life. Next slide, please. Evolution hardwired us to connect with others and to live with caring, open hearts. Evolution, not revolution, is the key to healing our exhausted bodies, minds, and spirits. It has given us scientific tools to develop the capacities to meet the darkness where it's at, be curious, and explore its many dimensions and move forward. We now have the knowledge to transcend to a higher level of wellness. President Biden said in his inauguration speech, this is our historic moment of crisis and challenge. In the Chinese language, the word crisis is composed of two characters. One represents danger, the other opportunity. We can use science to minimize the danger component and science to focus our awareness on the opportunities to grow and evolve. As Martin Luther King Jr. said, darkness cannot drive out darkness. Only light can do that. Hate cannot drive out hate. Only love can do that. Mindfulness guides us in ways to cultivate courageous hearts, to rise up through the turmoil and transform dysfunction into functional and beyond. Next slide, please. Just as the lotus flower rises out of the dark muck of the mud to bask in the warmth of the sun, we have the opportunity to bask in the warm comfort of being wholehearted in body, mind, and spirit by going inward and discovering all the possibilities. We have an opportunity to open our ears and our hearts to all of our suffering and to unite in shared compassion to move forward on a healing path. Next slide, please. Thank you. Poet laureate Amanda Gorman shared, the light is always there. Be brave enough to see it. Be brave enough to be it. I leave you with a few points to ponder. Where do you choose to shine your light of awareness? How do you show yourself compassion? What legacies do you want to leave for your children, for your grandchildren? And who are the compassionate leaders you look to for guidance? So now it is my pleasure to introduce my co-host, Nadeau Tramuto, an epitome of compassionate leadership. When he heard that many were suffering from food insecurity over the holidays, his foundation gave $10,000 to those in need. When he heard how fast those funds were exhausted, he doubled the amount the following day. 10 of those recipients were SJC students. Thank you to Nadeau. You're muted. You need to unmute.
You think I would know
Got
that? Thank you, Suellen, and a great presentation. And
Thank you.
I want to thank all of the supporters of St. Joseph's College, the alumni, the faculty, the friends, the administrative folks. The fact that you're having this session today really underscores the commitment of compassion from St. Joseph's College. I'm reminded by a great quote from Maya Angelou that life is not measured by the number of breaths you take, but by the moments that take your breath away. And I think that, Suellen, you characterized it very well, that we sometimes don't enjoy the moments, and perhaps maybe that is the lesson today, is to take time to really enjoy the moments. I want to characterize this. It's very interesting. When Suellen and I had our first conversation, I don't think she was aware that I was working on my second book on compassionate leadership. And I first stumbled over this notion that perhaps what's lacking in our society today is not just the compassion for others, but the compassion we show ourselves. And the more I got into, talking to Suellen, I was just struck by her understanding that we can't be compassionate to others until we are compassionate to ourselves, until we have that understanding of the need for our own spiritual attention, our physical attention. And that word mindfulness really does hit home. And so I think what I want to really share with you today is some of the data points that we are extracting out of my second book, without releasing all of the great information, because I hope that you'll read it when it's released in September. But I have spent nearly 40 years leading companies. And I've had the honor of leading small and mid-sized to very large companies. And the same challenge that I'm sure you experience in your relationships with others and the relationships you have with your colleagues is the same challenge that we experience in corporate life. And that is, why are there so many ineffective leaders? That we have tons of MBAs out there, we have tons of leadership seminars, yet we still have an enormity of challenges. I was on the phone today with the CEO of a company. Their board had asked if I would spend some time with this individual. And I have to tell you, the first 5 minutes, and if I had more time, I would probably do this today, but the first 5 minutes, I never heard one reference to this individual talking about her employees or talking about what she might be able to do to show more compassion to her board. It was 5 minutes of really talking about negative things. And so I really want to share with you from my experience what we all can do. And it's very interesting. Suellen, when I saw her slides, I was really just like, wow, she is so aligned with what I am finding in the many people that we are interviewing for the book, as well as the thousands of people that we have surveyed around what they believe is lacking in our interactions today. Next slide. Compassion. How do we define compassion? This is probably one of the most difficult words to define. I guarantee you, most people will say to you, compassion is being kind. Well, I've met a lot of kind people, and I'm going to tell you, I didn't feel like they were showing me compassion. It's more than being kind. And what my hope is today is that you will leave with a few very important nuggets of how we can address some of the most thorniest challenges in our society today by doing more than just practicing kindness. Next slide. Compassionate leadership, it's more about acting from both the head and the heart. It's about empathy, but it's also about doing something. Congressman John Lewis, who I've had the pleasure of meeting several times and having some deep conversations, one of his favorite quotes that I love, when you see something wrong, do something. And that's what compassionate leadership is about. It's about having empathy. It's also about doing something. I would protest to say that the majority of our challenges right now can be resolved if we had empathy and we did something. I was on a phone call the other day with a private equity investment firm that wanted to pick my brain on why they should invest in the area of food. As you know, there's a lot of discussion now that food is medicine. And there's a lot of food insecurity that's come out of the pandemic. But one of the investors said, why should I invest in this? The individuals that don't have food should go out and find a job and buy food. I was like, what? Now, there's no empathy there at all. And the reality is, if the individual could just step back and understand that not everyone, where you're born, the zip code where you live, not everyone has the benefit of a zip code that could allow them to pursue education or allow them to go out and get a job. And so the more we understand the needs of people, the more we can really instill this empathy and this understanding that we have a responsibility not to critique. We have a responsibility not to just look at life according to the way we live. Our responsibility is to look at life at the way someone else lives. That's compassion. I appreciate Suellen calling out the holiday fund, but quite honestly, the action step that means most to me in 2020 was not that action step. It was back about a year ago when I started to look at the Facebook postings of people that I knew. And what I started to sense was that there was this significant drop in social contact, that there was an enormous amount of what I saw mental health challenges. And rather than just say, gosh, you know, these folks will get over it, what I decided was I was going to do something. And 1 year ago, we launched what is now called Inspired Chat Calls. In fact, today at 5 o'clock, that call takes place. And it's for anyone who wants to get on this call and be inspired by others. And it was a moment of empathy, a moment of understanding that my just picking the phone up and talking to that individual wasn't enough, that we had to do something. And so action is a significant part of our compassionate leadership model. Next slide. A leader who detaches themselves from humanity of others and is not willing to be authentic in terms of their connections. Normally, when I start a conversation off, I don't start off the way I did today. I apologize, but we don't have enough time. As anyone knows, and Suellen knows this, I normally will start off by, please tell me your why. And it throws people off. Am I right, Suellen? It's, and by the way, I'm not just doing this because I'm now an honorary scholar. I've done this for decades in business. Imagine running a $2 billion company And the first time I became chairman, I asked every board member, before we talk about anything on the board agenda, tell me your why. Tell me why you do what you do. Nobody cares what we do until they know why we do it. Colleagues, we are faced with the new chronic condition of the 21st century called loneliness. Its toxic effects is equivalent to smoking 15 cigarettes a day. You don't even have to smoke anymore to experience the toxic effects. And what I've learned as I've gotten more into this loneliness as part of the compassionate leadership assignment is that people don't feel that their lives are relevant anymore. And by the way, it's not just the older population. Those of us like myself who are turning 65, who feel at times that our life might not be relevant. It's invading the young people. The young people don't feel relevant anymore. And so we have a unique opportunity to build trust with others by taking the time to get into the moment. As Maya Angelou said, life is measured not by the number of breaths that you take, but it's measured by the moments that take your breath away. Hearing the stories of other people can take your breath away. For those of you who want to join tonight at 5 o'clock for the Inspire Chat, you're going to hear stories of experiences that will take your breath away. I propose that the first step of compassionate leadership is taking the time to listen to the stories of other people. When I became the CEO of Tivity Health, which ran the largest physical fitness program for seniors, Silver Sneakers, do you know what I did my first 6 months? I went out and met with as many of our members. I met with nearly 10,000 seniors. I met with 1,500 of our 2,500 employees because I wanted them to get to know me, but more importantly, I wanted to get to know them. That is what builds trust. I have a corporate mantra that I like to share with you, and it's called the 3 T's. For those who want to effectively lead in their relationships, for those who want to effectively lead with compassion, practice these 3 T's. Tenderness first to get the trust, and then you can be tenacious. The problem is so many people start with tenacity and then they go around with a pooper scooper. They got to go and pick up the mess, and then they hope that they can get the trust. You won't get the trust if you've lost that connection of compassion. Next slide. Suellen, I love what you said about taking the time for mindfulness. Every night before I close my eyes, I ask myself, what could I have done better today? Who did I hurt unintentionally? And the next day I will pick the phone up and I will reach out to that person to apologize or to find out what I did. Anyone who's ever worked with me knows that I will wallow in this sense of what I could do better. Benjamin Franklin ended his days with 2 questions. What good have I done today? And what good shall I do tomorrow? That is the first step to getting to that empathetic position of compassion, is self-awareness, is taking the time. Look at many of the problems of the last year. I venture to say that if, whether you're, and this is not a political discussion, whether you're Democrat or Republican, it doesn't matter to me. But what we all could have done better was to ask, what good did I do today? And what good shall I do tomorrow? And how can I improve myself? That's mindfulness. That's taking the time to really self-reflect. Next question. Next slide, I'm sorry. Compassionate leaders are humble. They are individuals who are not afraid to share their stories. I have to share with you that for many years, having lost my hearing at age 8 and having been bullied and having developed this notion in my earlier years in business that you can't share that, don't share that, because if you say you're compassionate, people are going to view you as a weak leader. Colleagues, I wish I would have known how wrong that was in my first 15, 20 years. Once I started to share my story, that I failed the 5th grade, that I was bullied, that every conversation that I have is difficult and I have to work harder. The moment I shared that story, the moment I showed my own sense of humility and vulnerability, I have to tell you that I have developed relationships that I never imagined in my life. And so part of compassionate leadership is being open to knowing that your story matters, that your story can help others. We saw this the other day with the seniors. Joanne, you were on that call. One senior opened up about the grief that she's experiencing, and it just connected us to her in a way that had we not made it safe for her to share that story, I'm not so sure that that meeting would have been as successful. Next slide. I always say, if you want to practice humility, ask the question to which you are not afraid to receive the answer. Joanne, how am I doing? Ask the question to which you're not afraid to receive the answer. And be willing to embrace someone who's willing to be honest with you. We've witnessed in leadership, particularly in the last few years, of leaders who particularly don't want to hear how they can improve. And we are now embarking down a path where we have young people who quite honestly believe that that's the right direction to take. Parents don't want to hear others share with them what their children could do better. And there's a whole, we have enormous road rage out there. We have enormous amount of challenges there. Yet I am an optimist, and I am encouraged by the representation of our new administration, which changed relative to that compassionate leadership style that I think all of us can embrace and give hope to the future. I always say, begin with yourself to ask, what are 3 things you can do better? I don't care how old we are, we all have the opportunity to learn daily how we can improve ourselves. And it can't happen if you are in this enormous high-speed race with your life. It has to happen in the way that Suellen described. You need to take time for yourself. Suellen, I was struck by your notion that 47% of our time goes to the past. I did a study a number of years ago, and it came out very similar to what you just described. 40% of our time is spent in the past, 40% is spent in the future, 20% is spent in the present. Imagine if we can shave some of that time off of the past, shave some of that time off of the future, and enjoy today. Imagine if we did that.
Imagine.
I think we would become more empathetic. I think we would understand
Definitely.
the challenges that are before us. Next slide. Next slide. I'm going to move because I want to leave some time for a question. Next slide. I think Suellen covered this on the mindfulness, but I want to go to the courage, the courage. One of the areas of compassionate leadership that's coming out in spades is you have to have courage. You have to have courage to be willing to do something that you know is wrong. When we launched the hunger program back in December, I was shocked that in one day, nearly 60 people applied for that $10,000 fund. And by the time we got done, we had nearly 150 people, but I didn't stop there. I reached out to our leaders in Congress and the Senate, the individuals to whom policy change can happen. And so you've got to be bold. You've got to be willing to lead this in a way where you can unite with other people to solve the problems. And by the way, one person cannot do it anymore. One person cannot solve, if we're looking for the Mother Teresa or the, Robert Kennedy or the Dalai Lama, whoever your hero is in life, it's not going to happen anymore. I'm afraid that I'm going to surprise and shock you. It's going to be a movement among ourselves. The higher your collaborative IQ, the more we will get done. And if you can be compassionate to know that your idea is not the only idea out there, but with courage, be willing to share that idea with somebody else who may add a little spice or two, and someone else adds another spice or two. Imagine the problems that we can solve together. Next slide. Never, ever give up. I love this quote by Thomas Edison. Many of life's defeats are people who did not realize how close they were to success when they gave up. Just when you think it's over, you may find that your solution was exactly what was needed out there. Never, ever give up. Compassionate leaders never give up. Next slide. You're going to have disappointments. My first book, I talked about it, that winners overcome the obstacles. And never have excusitis. What we found is compassionate leaders don't have excusitis. By the way, excusitis is the inflammation of the excuse gland. I have had more people say to me, gosh, if I just had more money, I would donate. Or if I just had more time, I would donate. Let me say this to you. Life is not about doing great things. Life is about doing small things that have the capacity to drive great change. $1 can feed an entire family in Africa. It makes no difference how much you give. What makes the difference is you gave. It makes no difference how much you do. What makes the difference is you did something. Next slide. Next slide. I have spent a good portion of my life failing. Yet I have learned from those failures. And this is a quote that I came up with in my book, Fail to Succeed. What we're learning about compassionate leaders is that they didn't drop from the sky as compassionate leaders. And by the way, if you disagree with me on that you think compassionate leaders are natural born leaders, the next time you need a root canal, go on the street and find me a natural born dentist. No, you go to a dentist that has performed thousands of root canals. Compassionate leaders are constantly learning. What we're doing here today, I was pleased to see that nearly 25 people have gathered. That tells me you know the importance of constantly taking time to learn. And you're fortunate that you have a great organization and institution in St. Joseph's College that is committed to that sense of learning. Next slide. Next slide. And so I leave you with this last slide, which is one of my favorite quotes. Be ashamed to die until you have won some victory for humanity. There is so much work that needs to be done, but you have to make sure that you've taken care of yourself. I shared with Suellen a great story that I heard a number of years ago. It is about a husband and wife who were discussing how the wife felt that she was overworked in her household. And so the husband said, I'll tell you what, this Saturday, I am going to give you $500. I want you to go out shopping. I'm going to take care of the kids. You go and enjoy yourself. Well, then he realized when Saturday came along that he had 3 young children, a 5-year-old, a 7, and an 8-year-old. And he asked himself, what am I going to do with these kids? So he saw a National Geographic magazine that was in the living room. And he tore out a picture of a country and he tore it in 100 pieces and he got the 3 kids together. He said, I'll tell you what, if you can put this together, I will take you out to McDonald's. And he said to himself, they'll never get it done. Long and short, the kids left the room. They went upstairs. He went into the media room. He pulled a beer out of the refrigerator. He sat on the lounge chair, turned the tube on. 1 hour later, the kids ran downstairs and they said, here, we're done. And the father said, no way, you can't be done. And sure enough, they had put it together. And he asked them, how did you do it? And the young toddler said it was easy. On the backside was a picture of a person. We put that together first. And so, colleagues, there's a moral to that story, and I think it tailgates very well off of Suellen's presentation. You can't conquer the world. You can't win a victory for humanity unless you take time for yourself, unless you put yourself together. And one of the questions we've asked of our compassionate leaders, how do you show yourself compassion? And it was a question that no one could answer at first, because for whatever reason, we've been hardwired that it's not okay to take time for me. It is okay to take time for yourself. Thank you.
Thank you, Donato. Thank you, Suellen. Really great presentation. And certainly we probably have comments and questions. The information about the Inspired Chat is sent to all of you by your email. It's also on the chat function here, but let's open it up. Either write your question or raise your hand or speak up, please. Any comments or questions for Donato and Suellen?
We won't bite. It's really okay to ask. Any comments that anybody would like to add?
You might be on mute, so if you could remember to undo your microphone, that would be great. Sister, I think I hear you or see your lips moving, Sister Mary George.
Sister Mary George, you're on mute.
That's that crazy microphone. There you go, sister. Are you off? Hi, Steve Putnam. There's Steve Putnam.
How you doing? I was very impressed by both speakers, and I think the takeaway clearly is not only should we work to try to relax and be more effective as opposed to being concerned, but the second thing is certainly this 40, 40, and 20 indication is a good one that we should work on, because so many times we are looking at the past and saying, I wish we had done this, or I'm looking at the future and saying, maybe we could do this in the future. And we miss the fact that the most important day is not yesterday or tomorrow, it's today. So
In the moment, yes.
yeah. So
Well,
good
well said.
good thought. Mhm.
You know, Steve, there's a poster in my office in Maine, and it's a mother cat looking at her kitten. And the mother cat, the caption is, don't tell me that worrying doesn't help. What I just worried about didn't happen. And For whatever reason, we think by looking to the past or looking to the future and worrying about things that it really does help. The reality is it does not. And I do think that COVID-19 has really awakened everyone's awareness of how precious relationships are, how precious our time with friends and family. Perhaps maybe when this pandemic is done, there'll be, I know, volumes of books written, but perhaps the takeaway is that we've had a renewed sense of how important time is. And even that 1 minute with somebody, if you're not there enjoying it, you're really wasting that magical opportunity for a good connection.
True.
Nadeau and I were talking the other day, and I shared a story with him that again, it's an airplane metaphor. So if you're up in an airplane and you're going through very turbulent weather, like turbulent feelings and thoughts, that you go over a huge bump and your stomach drops and those oxygen masks come down, you're going to put the oxygen mask on yourself before you put it on the scared child next to you. So you've got to take care of yourself before you can take care of somebody else.
That's a great, I love that. It's a great. Now,
other questions? There is one, Donato, and the question is, what is your experience with empathy and communicating with people from other cultures to better connect with them? Can you talk about that? Certainly you have that experience.
It's a great question. And yes, I have, traveled across the world, visiting the countries that our foundations are supporting. And the connection of a smile, the connection, and perhaps maybe for those of us who have lived with disability, I don't know why when, you're deaf, people yell at you, when they know you're hard of hearing, why do they yell at you? Sometimes that eye contact, sometimes that just moment of, putting your head down. And I know when I have traveled, and Katie has traveled with me, is that, yes, sometimes you don't speak their language, yet you do speak that common denominator language of love. And that compassionate sense of feeling like you're connecting with somebody because you're looking directly in their eyes. And it's something that maybe because of my hearing loss that I try to do. And I know for many people, they get somewhat frightened by it because I'm trying to read their lips. But you don't have to speak somebody's language. There are so many different languages. Linguistic behavior, I'm sure many of you have heard of it. Watching the other person. When I'm, in the South, I talk very, very slow. I try to connect with the person. And so I think there's many different ways. I know when I've gone to Haiti, for example, many people are afraid to embrace and give somebody a hug. And as Katie knows, I will not hesitate to hug a child, to hug a mother, to hug. You can't do that today, but there's many different ways. My point is of how you can connect beyond words.
Donato, that's wonderful. There's I believe Sister Mary George's mic is now relieved, and I think she wanted to ask a question, and certainly compassion is a part of her everyday life. Sister.
Thank you for that comment, Joanne. But I do need to say that I feel so enriched from just spending this hour with two excellent presenters who know what they're talking about, and it comes from head and heart. And I could listen to you much longer, but time is cut out.
Thank you.
I taught a course in terms of organizations behavior. So Donato's input was just hitting it all and reminding me of, I love to teach and I love to learn. And that whole thing about my organization course, it was just refueling me with excitement. And I don't run any organization, so I just store it away with happy memories. And Suellen, it's wonderful to have a real educated presentation of mindfulness, which is a word that's thrown around so often these days, and yet to see it rooted in well-founded learning. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Sister, thank you so much. And just your point about this presentation, a little commercial in that St. Joseph's College, because Donato is the honorary scholar in residence, we are actually going to be able to witness and hear about his book before it actually hits the book stand. So we're looking at a date in April that we'll be gathering sort of a launch preview. He will be interviewing and talking to some of the for his book on that presentation. So all of you who are here and signed up for this course, you'll be getting an invitation. So stay tuned. I also wanted to comment. Oh,
I'm going to have to leave because we're 2 minutes late for this Inspired
okay.
Chapter. But I hope that some of you will join and be inspired by other leaders. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
I'll let you go, Donato, and I'll close with a couple things for our audience, if you don't mind, just as he takes off to the Inspired Chat. You all have an invitation to that, and that Inspired Chat is once a month. So you'll be getting at least once a month. Sometimes he has them once a week. So I'll be happy to send you that invitation when I get them. I also want to tell you that our Power Series is definitely in play, which is part of the Institute for Integrative Aging. Donato was supporting and a major supporter in seed money for the Institute for Integrative Aging. Heather Diano is on the call, our program director for the Institute for Integrative Aging. And next week, on March 3rd, you might be interested to participate in a 6-part series, which is called the Power Series, talking about resilience, talking about the power within you. Lots of great commentary about that. We'll send you all the newsletter that you can easily register for that. So if you haven't registered, you want to register for that free series.
And I will be presenting in part of that too. I just wanted to add, I'll be presenting emotional health as the very last Power Series.
That's right, Suellen. Thank you. And so, you'll want to see the speakers, who are all wonderful connections that, we have made. And certainly Heather is connecting with all of the presenters to bring an informative series. So with that in mind, go visit the Inspired Chat. Thank you for joining us, and great to see you all. And we hope to see you at the next Front Row with the Faculty. And that's the 2nd and 4th Wednesday of each month. Take good care.
Thank you for your presence.
Thank you, everyone.
Peace.
Thank you.